Hello, Mick and Dan here for That Pedal Show on Andertons TV on the Wampler stand with Brian Wampler.
How you doing?
We're doing great. So there's two things to talk about with Wampler. Actually, let's clear something up, Brian.
Sure.
I'm always saying Wampler. How do we say your name correctly?
Wampler.
Wampler.
I'm more American.
Okay.
Think cheeseburgers. Wampler.
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 Okay.
Cheeseburgers and fat foods. Wampler.
And I just like to apologise for saying Wampler all these years then. It's only his name, you know. Okay, Brian, so two things to talk about, which are...
Sure. So we have the best pedal platform amp in the world, of course. And then we have the Dracarys, which is our new metal distortion, let's call it.
Okay, so amplifiers, that's a significant departure for you. What's inspired you to go for an amp, and how does your amp differ from the 58 million other amps on the planet?
Well, most people don't know this, but like before, when I was doing the DIY stuff, I was also doing modifications to amps. So, I've always kind of tinkered with them, but I just never really did much with it. A couple years ago, we built like 4 or 5 and released those just to a couple customers. But at this time, I just wanted to get kind of really full throttle in it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, now's the time. We've got a pedal line. I would love to do some more amps. I've been working on amps for several years, and I've always been looking for like that perfect pedal amp. You know, that whatever, like you could put a metal zone in it and it sounds good.
Yeah.
And I never found that amp. So I just set about to creating that. So a very neutral platform, lots of headroom. It's not super loud even though it's 40 watts. But you know, it's got a special bright switch on it that really, if you have a pedal that always sounds fizzy, just turn the bright switch down 1 notch and the fizz is gone.
Yeah.
You know, so
what are we dealing with? We're dealing with an all valve amp, couple of 6L6s.
yeah, so 6L6 spaced, AT7 and a phase inverter, AX7 preamp. So yeah, it's just, I mean, it's based like the skeleton would be like a deluxe reverb.
Sure.
With more power, changing the EQ and changing the stuff in between the gain stages. So
yeah,
I mean, it's like, that's where it started from, but now it looks dramatically different. So
is there something specific about the input stage that you would say is different that makes it more pedal friendly, perhaps?
yeah, it's that's really where that bright switch comes in.
Yeah.
Because there's a, not to go at a nerdville on you, but there's a capacitor off that volume pot, right?
Go there.
Okay, so off that volume pot, there's a capacitor,
Yeah.
right? If you change like capacitance and resistance in between, right at that spot, then you could dramatically alter how that amp handles pedals.
Sure.
So that's really the magic of that bright switch. And then for the EQ, you know, you just try to find something where you're not scooping the mids out so much. It's more level. You got to have the right speaker with it. I chose the Creamback 65 for
Heavy
that.
magnet.
Yeah.
The 65.
The 65 actually worked a little better than the 75.
And what about loops? Is there a loop?
Yep, so I worked with Dave Friedman, known Dave for a while, and he allowed us to use his loop, which is just freaking fantastic. It is MOSFET based, but honestly I think it sounds better than 2 bass woods, especially when you're running through a solid state pedal.
Sure.
It sounds better. You don't lose any frequencies at all.
Yeah.
You know what? It just sounds. That's part of the things with tube is they have that warmth to them. But I didn't want the warmth right there. I wanted whatever the amp sounded like to sound like it. So yeah, it just works great.
Fantastic. Okay, let's hear it then. We have our stunt guitarist. Okay, so that is super interesting. I had a quick fiddle around with the controls there, which you might not have been able to see. Simon came up and gave us a close-up at the end there. What I could tell instantly, that bright switch is really interesting. One of the things that Dan and I have been doing a lot just recently is running preamp pedals directly into the effects loop return, and there's such a massive difference in the sound of where that pedal hits the amp in terms of how much brightness you've got.
Yeah.
And I can hear straight at the input there how relevant that's going to be for so many pedals.
Yeah.
So you can just tune it straight up. So that makes it's so. Just to explain that, there's a huge amount more available scope in terms of brightness on the input, which is exactly what Brian was explaining, but having heard it, it now makes perfect sense. So awesome. Well, I guess we're going to have to get one on the show pretty quick and plug some stuff in and have a listen.
I know a guy that can get you guys one. I know a guy.
Okay, let's move on. So, Dracarys, and I'm sensing by the name and the typeface that there may be some heavy tones here.
A little bit, yeah. It's not a country pedal by any means.
Not a tremendous amount to explain there, unless you would care to elaborate, sir.
It has a lot of gain to it. And it's really tight. That's the thing. I use it in drop D, right?
Yep.
So even like if you're on a 7 or 8 string guitar,
Yeah.
it still stays nice and it doesn't flub out like so many pedals do.
Even though, so we're obviously on the NAMM show floor, there's a lot of ambient noise, it's very hard to hear well. I think what I hear is in the mode with the switch down, it's a little more compressed, is that right?
Yeah, just it's a diode selection switch.
Right.
So depending on your diode configuration, you can make it more open, a little bit tighter.
So is that in terms of the clipping?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Fantastic. All right, there we go then. Wampler 2000 is Wampler to like a hamburger. Wampler. It's his name. 2017 Bravado amplifier Dracarys.
Dracarys.
Thank you for your time, sir.